guys doing? My name is Timothy Cato III, AKA Mr. I Got More to Say, AKA the ones whose style is impeccable and never questionable, AKA the one who got your back like chiropractic. And this is yet another episode of I Got More to Say. And today I am joined by Historical Musicology professor at SUNY Oswego, Dr. Juliet Forshaw. Dr. Forshaw, how are you today?
I'm great. It's so great to be here, Cato. Thank you for having me.
Nah, no problem at all. Dr. Forshaw, thank you so much for taking the trip all the way up here on such a beautiful day on your spring break, especially to come and just have good, honest conversations about the world of music, and especially about Black music and Black culture, which we're going to be diving into in a second. Dr. Forshaw, really fast, do you just want to introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about just a little bit about what it is that you do, your background in music, and how you chose it to, or excuse me, why you use music to serve and inspire?
Sure. I love what I do for a living. I think it's just amazing that I get to have conversations with people about music, and I think music is so important. It's been such an important force in my life, and so I really want to share that with other people. And I think, you know, we all have certain musical comfort zones that we get into, but what's been such a thrill for me is that all through my life I've gotten to learn about more and more different types of music, and now I get to share that with students, and that's wonderful. And how did I get into this? Well, I grew up singing in church, actually, and then I started taking piano and voice lessons, and I sang in high school musicals and college musicals, and I got really into classical music. I was really kind of a classical music nerd, and
really?
Yeah, so I didn't actually listen to all that much popular music growing up, but then when I was older, I really got into it, and I wanted to be an opera singer for many years, but then I decided that I'd really rather write about music and teach about music. So that's what I'm doing now, and I got hired at SUNY Oswego in 2014 after getting a Ph.D. at Columbia University in New York, and one of the classes I was hired to teach was a pop music class, and so that's one of my favorite classes to teach now, even though it wasn't what I originally kind of set out to study. But I love that class, and really what I'm talking about today is going to be drawing from that. So
certainly. Well, Dr. Forshaw, as I said before, out of all the classes that I wish I could have took at SUNY Oswego, I wish, and you know what? I actually could have took one of your classes, but for whatever reason at that time, something else interested me, I guess just a tad bit more.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, unfortunately, but you know, I thank you so much for being here. You know, I try not to give people too much praise on the camera, but you know, you are brilliant, a brilliant music mind, and I'm beyond honored that you took the time to come all the way out here. But Dr. Forshaw, just to kind of jump straight into things, or excuse me for Juliet, let me try that. Juliet, just to jump straight into things, one of the key the main topic that we talk about here on I Got More to Say is Black music and Black culture. And, you know, one day I was sitting up and I was thinking to myself, because I had just started to think, I had just had so many, I usually have a great music conversation about every week, at least one, with various different people. And I was thinking to myself, like, you know what? In American, I was reading a book, actually, I'm sorry. I was reading a book, and it was talking about how the music industry didn't really become what it is today. It really didn't have its origins until about like the 40s or the 50s. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like, labels weren't necessarily really, you know, there were like a few, but not the huge conglomerates that we see now with all the subsidiaries. And it just got me to thinking, like, what was music like before it became a hugely dominating business, before it became this multi-billion-dollar business? And I got to thinking about it, and I'm like, what was it like? And I was like, and what was it like, and how did Black people contribute? And one of the key things that it drew me back to is that I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So I went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because they had a hip hop exhibit. Because as you know, that, as everybody knows, or at least I hope people will know, that's like my, you know, that's the key to my heart is hip hop and hip hop culture. And as I got through the hip hop exhibit, I started getting to rock and roll. And I remember there was like in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, once you leave the hip hop exhibit, they have like this little, showing of like early innovators. Of rock and roll music, early contributors, as they say. So I guess the people who precursored rock. Mm-hmm. And I seen Gil Scott-Heron, I seen Mahalia Jackson. I seen this one Mississippi rock star. He was actually called the first rock star. I forgot his name, but there's like a rumor that he sold his soul, and that's how he got the ability to play guitar. And he died, I think, at like 28.
Yeah, that might be Robert Johnson.
Yes,
yeah.
that's his name.
Yeah.
So I start seeing all these people, and you know, there were some others, but I was looking and I was like, wow, like a lot of the key early contributors of modern music are people who look like myself.
It goes back so far. It's unbelievable. And people don't always realize how far back it goes because so much, well, really no black music was written down until the early 20th century. And then when W.C. Handy started publishing the first blues songs and Scott Joplin started publishing the first ragtime songs as sheet music. But there was, you know, there was so much before that never got written down.
Certainly, yeah. And I just got to thinking about now, but here my whole life, oh, well, black people, we've contributed to music, we've contributed to music, we've contributed to music. And I looked at that wall, and when I looked at that wall, I was like taken back.
Yeah.
So sure, you know, as I start walking through the exhibit, Elvis, of course, has the biggest showing. And, you know, me and you have had this conversation. We'll get to it in a second. But, you know, I give credit where credit is due. Elvis was a bad dude back in his day. But I just started looking at, you know, I looked at that, and then I looked at their contribution. I'm like, man, these are the early people when it comes to music. And then it got me to think even deeper. Majority of these people were born in the 30s and in the 20s. What about music before? So, you know, and I was like, man, really, when did, you know, because I would hear like, you know, a lot of music was started, you know, like on plantations with, you know, what is it like, I don't like to say slaves, I like to say enslaved. Enslaved people, you know, working on plantations, and, you know, they would sing and things of that nature. And then you actually told me an interesting bit about that. And then I was like, what happened before the 20s? Before the Roaring 20s, before jazz, what happened? When we talk about Reconstruction era music, you know, I've recently come across just this notion of, when we talk about early music, we always talk about 19th century. Excuse me, 20th century. We don't necessarily talk about 19th. And I remember one of our first discussions when I told you that I wanted to talk about music during the Reconstruction era being, you know, as soon as, the enslavement period in America was officially over. And one person you wanted to mention was Scott Joplin. He's from where you're from, being Missouri. Can you talk a little bit about his importance, what he did as a composer, and how he's one of maybe the biggest and most influential figures of the Reconstruction era?
Scott Joplin is one of my heroes, a St. Louis hero. He was not born in St. Louis, but he spent quite a bit of his life there and did some of his most important publications there. And there's a house that's been turned into a museum that's devoted to him. And I had the opportunity to grow up playing his simpler ragtime pieces. Some of them, you know, they get pretty complicated. But yeah, Scott Joplin is really not the inventor of ragtime, but the person who put it on the map. And let me just explain ragtime for a second. Like, what's ragged about it? Ragtime. So this is really the first black piano style. Let me just back up by saying that during the period of slavery, of course, black musicians, black enslaved people saw pianos in houses, and they generally weren't allowed to touch it. But the first thing black musicians did when they got their freedom, they went out and got pianos, okay? And in many cases, basically they spent the rest of their lives paying off the debt to buy a piano. Buying a piano was, you know, it was an insanely expensive thing to do, but there were all these budding black musicians who I guess they just knew that if they took that chance, they would learn how to play this instrument and do something really good with it, and they did. And so ragtime was this style that emerged out of black musicians playing in some pretty hard situations, okay, because they were being very discriminated against and couldn't get the better gigs, so they were getting hired to play in brothels and saloons. And they started doing this thing with classical pieces where they would kind of improvise more complex rhythms with them. So they would take these classical pieces and basically add syncopation to them. And syncopation is when you have unexpected rhythmic events in the music. And black music has always been so very, very, very interested in rhythm, much more so than white music. European white music has always been more focused on chords and melodies, whereas black music is really, really about percussion and rhythm to a degree that white music just kind of isn't. And so And so basically they were doing what they called it ragging these pieces, where we're going to take this really basic piece and we're going to make the rhythms raggedy, more interesting. So Scott Joplin was playing this music and hearing this music, and he was like, gee, it would be great if other people could hear this music because it's really good. And right now it's being condemned to just these venues where people aren't even really paying attention to it. It's in a brothel, and people are too busy doing other things to really pay attention. And so he was like, okay, you know what? We're going to turn this music into respectable music that everybody is going to play in their homes and love. And so he started writing it down and writing original rags, and he published it as sheet music. This was just before sound recording was really a thing, or a widespread thing. And so most of the way that people learned new music was that they would go to music stores and buy sheet music. And pretty soon, everybody who had a piano was playing ragtime. And he was the first kind of black composer superstar who made a huge name for himself publishing sheet music.
Okay.
And we are all so much the richer for it. It is ragtime. It really is something that everybody needs to listen to.
Certainly, yeah, because I remember when I listened to his Maple Leaf Rag and his Entertainer, I was like, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And I know you said, like, when it comes to playing ragtime, it's generally a lot of syncopation, which you said is a consistent rhythm in one hand, and then another, like, more complex kind of improvisation in the other.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, the left hand is playing a really basic march rhythm for ragtime, whereas the right hand is doing flying fast notes all around the march rhythm.
Yeah.
So you're getting both the steady beat that you can tap your foot to, but all the other cool stuff happening that makes it interesting. Syncopation is hard to do well. It's easy to just have it be too chaotic and sloppy, but Scott Joplin was very, very careful in how he did it, and he always recommended not to play ragtime too fast, because if it's too fast, then things start getting sloppy. And he also wanted it to be dignified. He was like, yeah, I know, like ragtime was like the prostitution music, but we're actually going to make it respectable. Yeah, he even wrote an opera that's kind of all ragtime, and I got to see this opera when I was a kid, and it changed my life.
Really?
It was amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and then, the thing I love about Scott Joplin is, his rags, as far as what he was able to do on piano. You hear it on the Ice Cream Truck songs, Charlie Brown, like everything. Like his influence, even 100 years after his unfortunate relatively early passing, which I know you spoke about, is just due to a lot of musicians back then just lived hard lives and they passed away early, unfortunately. But you said that there was a movie that eventually ended up getting ragtime to be appreciated and recognized in more recent times.
Yeah. Unfortunately, ragtime did fall out of fashion. It really got superseded by jazz to such a degree that a lot of people now think jazz was kind of the first American popular music. Actually, ragtime was before jazz. But yeah, ragtime got revived in the 1970s after a movie called The Sting, which is a heist movie starring Robert Redford, came out, and the soundtrack uses The Entertainer. And that movie kind of brought ragtime back into fashion a little bit. So
certainly, and the thing I love about it is that it ended up helping Scott Joplin win a Pulitzer Prize posthumously, and they even went back. When he died, he was probably kind of broke, like penniless, as I heard him described, and they buried him in an unmarked casket. And like now they went back and I feel like they finally showed him some appreciation after his passing. They went and they put his name on his tombstone and everything.
And that's the story of so many black artists. And I'm just so happy that they're getting credit now, more so. And it's too late, unfortunately. Like they're dead, some of them. But I'm glad at least we get to play our small part today in keeping their memories alive and celebrating it. And it would make me so happy if everybody in the world knew what ragtime was, and I teach it in all my classes, and I'm thrilled I get to help transmit some of that.
Certainly, and then there's probably a level of like pride that you take a little bit more than other people, just being the fact that Scott Joplin I know he was born in Texas, but he lived around where you were born. What is there like a different level of like passion and I don't know. responsibility you feel?
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, Chuck Berry also spent a lot of time in St. Louis. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had this conversation.
Yeah.
St. Louis is a very musical city.
It is.
Yeah,
It
like a
is.
lot of
Yeah.
St. Louis, Memphis. I feel like those are very underrated music
I
cities.
think Snoop Dogg spent a lot of time in St. Louis. I think I have to check that, but yeah. Yeah, it's a great town for music.
Certainly. I mean, even if we talk about hip hop, I mean, Nelly is one of the first.
Nelly, yeah, it might not have been Snoop Dogg. Yeah, Nelly for
Nelly's
sure.
from St. Louis.
Yeah, right, Nelly.
He's one of the first rappers to ever go diamond.
Yeah.
You know, so St. Louis
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, the figures that they have there are definitely substantial when it comes to music. Just to stay on topic, what is it, Dr. Forshaw? Also with early era music, we have the Reconstruction. I mean, towards the end of Reconstruction, we had Dr. Thomas A. Dorsey.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about his influence, his impact, and what his genius and contribution was to black music?
Yeah, Thomas A. Dorsey was such a complex and interesting figure because he really straddled these two worlds that were light years apart, and then he kind of brought them together. And so this is gospel and the blues. And so he grew up in a religious family. He grew up, learning music in church, as so many of these black musicians did. And but he also had this crazy life as a barroom pianist, doing the blues. And he even he had such a double life that he even recorded the blues under a different name, Georgia Tom, and he wrote these just really dirty, awesome party blues songs with Tampa Red. And my favorite of their dirty blues songs is called "It's Tight Like That," and this song is just so funny. It's early primitive sound recording from the 1920s, but you all better go out and check out this song. You can find it on YouTube or Spotify, and this song will just have you in stitches. But anyway, then Thomas A. Dorsey got religion, and so he started writing all this gospel music. And of course, he then got some flack for importing some of his blues stylings into gospel music. But what he had to say about that was, he said he just didn't really want to abandon the blues or feel the need to abandon the blues, because you see, when a thing becomes a part of you, you don't know when it's going to manifest itself.
That's what he said.
Yeah, and it's not your business to know or my business to know, which was an interesting way to kind of explain to his critics that, well, hey, I was a blues musician. That's who I am, and yeah, some of that is going to enter my gospel music, And he didn't see a problem with that, and really, if he hadn't done what he had done, we wouldn't have R&B, because R&B is basically what happens when gospel meets the blues meets the electric guitar meets a big beat, that it wouldn't have happened without Thomas A. Dorsey combining his religious views and experiences with the naughty blues and everything. So he really did the world a service, even though he took some flack for it at the time.
Certainly. Well, yeah, almost if you want to make an impact, that almost comes hand in hand with it.
And he probably couldn't even have predicted where other musicians were going to go with this. But he worked with Mahalia Jackson.
Yeah, you said he coached her.
Yeah. So... yeah, Aretha Franklin, soul, none of it would have happened
without Thomas Dorsey.
Yeah.
So he was do you consider him a composer as well? And you said composers. Can you define composer again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we don't hear the word composer too much in pop music. We tend to hear the words songwriter or producer. I think what makes a composer different is a composer is someone who's generally had more formal musical training, plays an instrument or multiple instruments, reads music, writes and publishes sheet music. Okay, so whereas a songwriter, not all songwriters read music. They tend to have great instincts and great feel, and they understand chords, but they don't necessarily write out all the notes for somebody to play. So, composers, I would say, composers put more thought into the writing music end of it, whereas songwriters and producers tend to put more emphasis on the sound architecture, like the recording engineering aspect of it. So composers typically don't learn anything about about engineering. Okay, it's kind of two different skill sets, and some people do it all, but it's really hard to master both of those things. So people tend to do one or the other.
So they're the people who actually write the notes and the chords and everything. So like the sheet music, which you see is a composer.
Yeah.
Okay, so with Thomas Dorsey and he wrote a lot of you would say, the actual music behind gospel, and he also wrote a lot of the gospel songs. And you said that his biggest contribution, you said, was being able to blend, what is it, like the style of gospel music with the secular topics of, you said, the blues.
Yeah, with and even a lot of musical aspects of the blues wound up in his gospel music. So one thing about the blues is that it often features what are called blue notes, which is basically when you sing a note flat that would normally have been a different note, but you just kind of make it flat, and that really adds this extra dimension. So blues artists, they inherited the major and minor scale from European music, but basically blues musicians, you could say they color up the major scale with a few notes from the minor scale to make it more interesting. Okay, so it's kind of like the same issue with syncopation. It's like you're taking this style of music that that Europeans were doing, but then you're kind of doing it your own way and turning it into your own thing. And that's basically what generations of black musicians did with this tuning system and the major and minor scales, that they inherit, that the European music and European instruments are designed to do. And they just started doing blue notes or adding these extra notes in there. So Thomas A. Dorsey definitely did that in his gospel music. So black gospel music is basically like white Protestant hymns meets these blue notes. Yeah, so.
Essentially. So you spoke about gospel music, and we spoke about this earlier, but when it comes to when it comes to black people, you said that the church is highly influential as far as where a lot of us get our start, like even me.
Yeah.
One of my earliest memories as far as with music has been sitting and listening in the choir. I mean, I never sang in the choir because I can't sing worth a damn. Can you please describe or define why the black, why the church in general is so important to so many black musicians?
Well, I think, first of all, just being a positive and supportive environment within a larger society that's not so positive or supportive is super important. It's like, the black church has been a huge, just maybe the single most important force for holding black communities together through hard times. Okay, and I think, I don't know how your viewers feel about religion or whatever. Like whatever you think about religion, churches can be really powerful forces for bringing people together.
Certainly.
Now, they can also be very judgmental places that, like, sometimes they do harm as well. But I think overall the black church has been so important just for holding the black community together. The black church was so important for the civil rights movement, and specifically for music, which is really what we're talking about, because, again, most of these young black kids, they didn't really have that much access to instruments or lessons, or they might have been in school districts that weren't very well funded, so there wasn't a lot of musical education happening in school. So the church was where they got their first exposure to music. And another thing I'll add about that is the black church is so much more focused on call and response than most white churches. So the black church it's much more open to congregations having spontaneous reactions to things that the minister is saying. Now, I'm saying this, I get excited about this because I grew up going to church, and I definitely grew up in a church setting where, I was basically being quiet and listening to the priest, and I just think it's really exciting, though, to see other types of environments or other religious settings where there is more give and take. There's more back and forth between the minister and the congregation. And I think that really, call and response is such a big part of black culture and black music and the black church. And I think call and response is where young people start developing the confidence, right? Because nobody starts out being a caller. You have to respond first. You respond to what other people are doing, and then you build up your own confidence, and then you get to be the caller, and other people respond to you, and it goes together.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So, and you said the Black church really taught, was very empowering for a lot of Black musicians, even till this day. And you said that it teaches you teamwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Teamwork, how to work with one another.
Yeah. Yeah.
Music brings people together.
Yeah, and a big part of gospel is quartets, you know, these male a cappella quartets where, you know, there's no instruments backing you up. It's just you four guys, and you got to figure out a way to make this sound good, you know? And so that there's the amount of teamwork that goes into that is unbelievable, you know? So.
Certainly, yeah, because you mentioned this earlier when it comes to, you know, just music will bring people together, and, you know, it will, as you said before, it will make people less selfish, because, you know, you're all, like, music for whatever reason brings people together, and it helps them create their best work.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's held to, like, a little bit, like, accountability, I feel like also plays a part in it.
Yeah, I think music, I mean, I'm a music educator, so of course I think music is just incredibly important and amazing. I think music makes people smarter. It makes people more empathetic. You have to read body language. You have to really pick up on subtle cues from other people.
Certainly.
So it teaches. It's mathematical. You have to count. You have to keep track of things. Like music really just it encourages teamwork and equality in so many ways. And on that note of equality, I will just say that. Integration happened in music before it happened in most of the rest of society. So I'm not sure the civil rights movement even would have happened if jazz hadn't happened first. So suddenly Black musicians and white musicians were playing together. They were integrated in bands before they were integrated in larger society. And because of jazz, all these white Americans were seeing all these Black musicians doing this amazing thing. And that kind of softened them up to this idea that, hey, like, actually, like, look at these people. They're doing, this takes real brains to do. Like, these are really smart people, you know? And I think jazz musicians really modeled that in a way that was important. And so when the civil rights movement happened, it happened after a generation of people seeing Black excellence on display, you know, and like that kind of like slowly changing people's minds over a long time. And then when the civil rights movement came along, it was like, okay, it's time, we're doing this.
Sure.
But that wouldn't have happened if people hadn't laid groundwork for generations before that.
I see.
So, you know, people like, I mean, Thomas A. Dorsey and Mahalia Jackson and, you know, like they helped make this happen. Yeah.
Dr. Forshaw, can you please, because I love Mahalia Jackson. I listen to her music every Sunday. First thing I listen to. I won't listen to nothing else until I listen to Mahalia. Can you please describe her importance? Because I know you said when it comes to gospel music, she probably is well, at least in your eyes and your opinion, and your expert opinion rather, she is the figure when it comes to gospel music.
She is the great female vocalist of gospel who just really set the template. And you know, even when I listen to Aretha Franklin, I hear echoes of Mahalia Jackson. It's like that powerful, rich, deep voice, huge range, so expressive. What I really like about Mahalia Jackson's voice, well, it's such a unique voice, and she's got this grit in it, you know, like not only is her voice very beautiful, but she digs really deep, and she has this grit that, you know, as a singer, I kind of think, oh, you know, like that could have come out really badly. Like it's easy to mess that up, but somehow she's got the grit. She had the grit and the grace, you know, and that is it's not easy to have both of those. Like there are a lot of singers who just have the grit or just have the grace, but
she had both.
She had
it on a level that just people just didn't have.
Powerful.
Because you know, I asked you earlier, like, you know, when it comes to Mahalia, what about her helped her break? Because I'm sure that there were other, you know, very talented female vocalists within the gospel, within gospel music. But you said what helped her break is just her ability that just very few, if anybody else, had.
Yeah. Yeah, and coming out of the classical music world, I always appreciate just a person with a really big voice who doesn't even need a microphone. And she had such a powerful voice.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of powerful voices, Dr. Forshaw, something that I didn't touch on before that I want to touch on now, just to kind of take it away from gospel music for a quick second. When it comes to powerful voices, and when it comes to early innovators of black music, I feel that, black artists and entertainers, I feel like the opera has been criminally overlooked. And two people that me and you spoke about was Leontine
Price.
Leontine.
Yeah.
Leontine Price and Marian Anderson. I know Leontine Price is someone that you really respect and, really look to and are inspired by.
Grew up listening to her, yeah.
Can you talk to us about Leontine Price and what her impact or her contribution to music was and why she's such a historical figure? Yeah,
She's one of the golden voices of the mid-20th century and on. She had a very long career, and I grew up listening to her record of, she did Aida by Giuseppe Verdi, and she played the main character in that. And that's actually an opera set in Egypt, and it's about an Ethiopian princess named Aida. And she was just so compelling in that role and just amazing. And she really changed how people saw what opera could be, because she did role. I mean, she played black roles, but also white roles, and she just did all of it. And her voice, well, like Mahalia Jackson. I mean, I'm kind of a broken record here, but there are just so many amazing black female vocalists who just have. I think in fact, they were kind of similar, I would say, in that they both had huge ranges. And Leontine Price she was a soprano, so she had a high voice. She could hit all the high notes, but she had the depth, And I tell people that what I really like about her is that she's got the drama and the passion in her voice. She's not just a pretty voice. Like she had a beautiful voice, but you feel it, And not every opera singer is like that. There are an awful lot of opera singers who just make pretty sounds, but you don't really feel a lot of emotion. So
she was able to blend feeling and just the beauty of having a great voice, in a really transcending way.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I understand. Leontine Price is still alive.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think she's 95 years old, man. God bless her.
Very influential.
Yeah, certainly. What is it? That's somebody I really want to meet. Like, just hearing the way you talked about her and the way you spoke about her.
She's an icon.
Yeah, if I ever get a chance to meet her, guarantee you I will at least get you a photo and an autograph. I promise, Dr. Forshaw.
Please.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Forshaw, can we talk a little bit about Marian Anderson? Because she's another influence. I think they were around the same time, correct?
Actually, Marian Anderson was earlier, and there are not too many records of her because she was earlier. But she kind of put black opera singers on the map. She was one of the earliest. She was one of the earliest black opera singers to sing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City, and she was a contralto, so a low voice. And she really showed. She showed a way forward for black artists, and she was very, very glamorous, and she just looks amazing in the pictures of her. She's just such a glamorous and beautiful woman with such a huge voice, and she really broke the barrier. Like once she did it, then a lot more black artists were able to follow her into opera.
So she walked so Leontine Price could run, and the people, well, not just Leontine Price, but so Leontine Price and all the other ones, all the other black female singers can run.
Yeah.
Understandable. Dr. Forshaw, this is actually unrelated to originally what I want to talk about, but I hear you speak so compellingly and with so much, with so much passion about the voices that the Marian Andersons, the Mahalia Jacksons, and the Leontine Prices. I hear you speak so much about just how their voices made them superstars. And this is just an opinion I have. I always said that new age people today that can sing can't sing compared to people from the 20th century.
I agree with you.
because I got into this discussion. Thank you so much. Because people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, for example, I got in this discussion with somebody, and I'll tell people, I love the female R&B artist. Because I consider female R&B and male R&B two totally different genres for my own personal reasons. But I love the female R&B artist. But the ones that have come out within the last 15, 20 years cannot hold a candle to the Mahalias, the Leontines, the Marian Andersons. And although opera is very much different, I even tell people now, Beyonce can't sing like Whitney Houston. Rihanna can't sing like Stephanie Mills. I'm sorry.
No,
because you say
great.
You agree with me.
I'm so glad you brought this up. No, well, first of all, I'm a singer, so I really respond passionately to singers, and I nerd out on voices, and so. But I'm really glad you brought that up. I think in a weird way, I think artists today rely a little bit too much on technological props, okay? And so nowadays, everybody wants to modify their voice with some effect or other, okay? And that's fine. Like, you can do a lot of creative stuff with that, but I think, you know, with a really distinctive and powerful and interesting voice, you don't actually have to do that much to it. And I think a lot of artists today, like, they haven't really cultivated that unique voice, and so they just rely on a bunch of technological add-ins to try to get it there. There's another really interesting technical issue that plays into what you brought up, which is that big voices, powerful voices, are actually harder to record than small voices. So in a weird way, the smaller voices, the Beyoncés of the world, are easier to record than the Mahalia Jacksons of the world. Because basically, when you put a really powerful, sensitive microphone in front of somebody, if they have a really big voice, the big voice will tend to overwhelm the mics and cause it to distort. So it's really hard to get the mic to kind of pick up the voice correctly. This is an issue called a dynamic range, where somebody has a really big difference between their softest sounds and their loudest sounds. And it's easy for the mic to get overwhelmed in a situation like that. Whereas if you're dealing with somebody like Beyonce, who has a smaller dynamic range, her voice is less likely to overwhelm the mic.
Certainly.
So it's a really interesting technical issue, you know, where the people who sound the best on recordings and are easiest to record aren't always the people who sound the best in a live setting.
Certainly, and you know, and thank you for breaking that down, because, you know, I think music has just become so much of a business instead of what it was back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you know, around the era we're morally talking about. Because, like, you know, no disrespect to Beyonce whatsoever. I love her music.
Yeah, she's
superstar,
wonderful.
and she's great, she's talented. But I always said, since the year 2000, the only people who have come out to me that can really sing, as far as from a female R&B perspective, not really anybody, I'll be honest. Because even then, I was going to say Mariah Carey, but Mariah Carey came out in the 90s. Or even Mary J. Blige, who Mary J. Blige can sing, but I think her true genius is in her songwriting ability. But even when you look at Dionne Warwick, Stephanie Mills, Whitney Houston, Mahalia, as before, even when we talk about opera, Leontine Price and Marian Anderson, the singers today can't hold a candle to them.
Yeah, I mean, there's always somebody somewhere doing something great. I always think, okay, I just haven't found them yet. You know, there's somebody out there doing something amazing. But
and I love Beyonce, Rihanna.
Yeah, they're wonderful, and what they've learned how to use the technology in a way that's really powerful.
Certainly.
You know, so yeah, no
shots at them whatsoever. But I'm glad that because I'm like, man, these, like, because when I listen to Mahalia, I'm like, I had to cut it off.
I'm old-fashioned. Yeah, I just love a big voice. I love seeing somebody who can just get up there with no props whatsoever and just blow you away with just them.
Just their voices. Yeah, because even with Mahalia, I had to turn it off and had to sit with it for a second, and I was like, these so-called people who can sing can't sing like this. This is singing.
Yeah.
You know, and like, no disrespect to anybody else, but you know, that level of talent is like the Mahalias and everybody that we mentioned. Is that just few and far between now?
Well, I got one more thing to say about that. So that kind of talent has always been few and far between.
Like every 100 years.
Well, again, there's always somebody out there who's doing it, but like how many people in a given generation? Not very many, you know. But the one other thing I'll say about that is that, you know, really big voices tend to come in big packages, okay? That's just physics and biology. And part of the problem is that we live in such a visual culture, and for female artists, it's just really hard to, like, it's hard to be really successful if you don't also look like a model, basically. And so, so unfortunately now we have this situation where we have all these really charismatic, gorgeous pop singers who have very small voices because they just don't quite have the padding, you know, frankly.
I like how you worded that. That was nice.
You know, I mean, you don't get a Mahalia Jackson voice in a Beyonce body, you know, and no disrespect to either one of them, you know, but for sure, we kind of force female artists today to occupy this tiny little box where they have to, you know, they have to be really thin and they have to be really hot, and we expect them to have huge voices, and that's just not really biologically possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and
it's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that you shed light on that, because I never even thought to put two and two together. But like, just to share a quick story, a lady who does Broadway, I think her name is Cleopatra Jenkins, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I've come across her singing. I'm like, wow, she could really sing. And you know, she I like how you worded that. She's a little bit more padded, and you make a great point, because it's like, wow, like that does play a role in it. So, but you know, whereas men, we don't really have that issue.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, to not at least near the extent that women have it.
It's interesting, and I don't really know why it's one of those mysteries of biology, I guess. But,
certainly. So really a way that we can really help, really bring and probably discover and really make the most talented people, or the people with the biggest voices, is to get rid of all of these
like ridiculous body image, unrealistic body norms that we expect of celebrities. The more we can, and you know, as an educator, you know, I try to stress this to people that, you know, these people you see on TV who make music, like most of them are not the best musicians out there. They're people who look great and have some musical chops, but the best musicians are just regular looking people mostly, you know, and like learn the difference, like learn to pay attention to that and not just focus on, you know, what they look. Well, we live in a very superficial culture, so you know, it's important to remind people of stuff like this.
Certainly. Now, and I appreciate that, Dr. Forshaw, because I would have never even put two and two together. Yeah. You're definitely right in that regard, and I appreciate that. Dr. Forshaw, just because we are coming up close on time, another thing I just wanted you to go over really fast. We spoke about jazz, and you said that jazz has, the only way for jazz really to reach commercial relevance in the grand scheme of modern music is that it has to go back to being the fun party music.
Yes, make jazz fun again. You know, that's what we got to do.
You said it's gotten too academic.
Yeah, it has. And I say that with great love and respect, because I go to so many great jazz concerts at SUNY Oswego, and my colleagues who teach jazz are just amazing, and they've done. So it's a great thing that jazz has become institutionalized. It's great that people get to go to college and study jazz. Like, that is a wonderful thing. Now we just got to bring back the fun, though. Certainly. You know, which is kind of true of academia altogether. Like, it needs to be. And this is why podcasts like what you're doing are so important, because this is kind of making music fun again, where like, you know, because you know, I teach music in class and I try to make it fun, but classroom settings are inherently kind of they're a little sterile, you know, and people know there's going to be a test at the end, so that kind of kills a little bit of the fun.
Certainly.
So I think the power of podcasts like this is it's a way to communicate some of the same information that you might get in a class, but in a more fun way.
Certainly, yeah. And I appreciate you for coming on, because you are, a wealth of knowledge that, you know, as far as about a lot of these topics that I'm interested in. Just to touch on, like I said before earlier when we spoke on jazz, you said the key people in jazz, in your expert opinion, are Louis Armstrong, I forgot. I think I forgot. Oh, you said what is it? Duke Ellington.
Duke Ellington,
someone
yeah,
else.
yeah. I would say Joe King Oliver,
Yes.
for really important early band leader. Like those are my, I mean, but also Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie invented bebop, and Miles Davis, I would say, is the most important figure in avant-garde jazz from the 50s on, and Wynton Marsalis, who really established jazz at Lincoln Center. He really made jazz. He kind of set jazz on the concert music path. Those are the big names that I try to hit when I teach jazz.
Okay.
And obviously it goes so deep, and there are so many more
Certainly.
great jazz
Now,
musicians.
Can you just briefly? Can you define or tell what is Louis Armstrong's his contribution to it? And
Yeah.
His impact.
Well, yeah, he's one of the most beloved figures in American musical history, deservedly so. And he just had the most amazing trumpet and cornet tone. And he got his start doing kind of collective improvisation in the New Orleans counterpoint style of jazz, but he really established the art of the virtuoso soloist in jazz. And so he just really raised the bar for what a jazz musician could be. And
Because you said before
yeah.
jazz was everybody playing together, but he established like, okay, this is almost being like a solo star.
yeah.
So after Louis Armstrong, you also mentioned Duke Ellington, and you said his importance and his impact was.
Duke Ellington, I would say, he really helped consolidate the big band era of jazz. So when jazz got started, it was small improvisatory groups playing together. But then as it got more popular, it got bigger. You know, that's kind of what happens in America. When something gets popular, it gets bigger, louder, more. So more instruments got added. And so jazz went from being a very small group thing where you might have 5 or 6 people playing together to these big bands that might have 15, 20 more players. So, of course, when you have that kind of setting, when you have that many musicians, you really need somebody to act more as a conductor and kind of guiding the whole group. So Duke Ellington kind of took the best aspects of like being a classical music conductor and combining it with jazz. So he was able to compose very complicated, worked out music for a large group of people, like an orchestra, and also be a great band leader. And he was also very, very careful, though, at recruiting players specifically for their timbres, for their unique way that they played their instrument. And so, you know, he wasn't just telling people what to do and they're obeying him. He was recruiting people who he knew, scouting, and hey, you got a really interesting tone, and so I want you in my band. And then he was able to like let those people, set those people free to do those cool things. That's the key thing, you know. If you're going to be a really great band leader, you don't want to be just telling people what to do. You want to like create an environment where, you know, you're kind of giving people some guidance and some direction, but then letting them kind of bring their unique thing to the table.
Certainly.
So Duke Ellington was really, he was a really, really talented people person in that regard.
Okay, and then you said Dizzy Gillespie and.
Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker were really important for bebop.
And can you define bebop?
Yeah, so bebop is another one of these funny words. People found bebop very chaotic and confusing when it came along, and basically it kind of liberated jazz from having a steady beat. The drums kind of do their own thing in bebop. It's very weird music, and the reason it's called bebop is people felt like it was random, like it was bop. Like that's kind of how people hear it. And if you listen to Salt Peanuts by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's kind of these fast noodling lines of notes that are all over the place, and suddenly a really unexpected accent somewhere. So it's very dissonant. So it's kind of, you don't really hear it as major or minor or bluesy. It's like its own weird thing where it almost doesn't. It's what some musicians call atonal, where it kind of isn't in major or minor and just doesn't, like, it sounds like its own thing.
Certainly.
And Yeah, very, very influential style, but one of the styles that made jazz less popular because it was a little too complicated for people. But that's how jazz musicians are. You know, jazz musicians are brilliant intellectuals who want to push things forward and take things in a more intellectual or esoteric direction than their audiences always want to hear.
Certainly.
It's tough. It is tough being as smart as Charlie Parker.
Yeah,
Like,
I can imagine.
You know.
I mean, you know, sometimes a lot of intelligence, you know, or
Yeah.
even just being the most intelligent person in a situation could.
And people would say that his alto, there was something merciless about his alto saxophone playing. It's like he kind of didn't care what people thought, you know, and he would just come in and play his thing, and and people would say like his tone is so cold and there's no mercy in it. It's just so fast and furious and like, yeah. So he was a real genius.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm glad that I have this
Yeah.
platform to be able to talk about a lot of these early jazz innovators because, I mean, people my age aren't really, I feel like we just don't even have an appreciation for it. Like the only,
And I didn't
you know,
either when I was growing up. It really took my jazz trombonist friend in grad school taking me to all these concerts. So it's not just your generation. It's kind of been out of
for a while.
out of popular music for a while, and you know, we got to bring it back.
Certainly, yeah, because, you know, the way I look at it, as I always said, like, you know, hip hop, I say, is really the art form that black people, we can unequivocally call our own as far as being free. I understand jazz musicians were technically free, but a lot of them were definitely living in some slave-like conditions.
Yeah.
But, you know, even with jazz, I mean, it's the precursor to rock and roll. It's the
Yeah.
precursor to blues.
Yeah.
It was the party music of the 20s, so it's the precursor to so many of the genres we enjoy today. So, you know, I'm glad that it's able to be appreciated on this setting. Definitely. To transition off the topic of jazz, one of the people, maybe the person I might have the most admiration for, and probably ever when it comes to music, is Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Can you talk about her? Because there's a lot of ways we could go with this, but I figured I'd just let you, yeah.
She was a guitar player at a time when not very many women were playing guitar, really, and of course, she really made her mark in gospel, but also very influential for early rock. She actually toured alongside Muddy Waters in, I think, 1964, but that was quite a bit later in her career. But she was very influential for Little Richard and Chuck Berry, and yeah, she really doesn't get the credit she deserves, and she's not talked about all that much. And I think people tend to think of rock as a very masculine genre, and I mean it is to a large extent. So I think people don't always realize just how influential people like Rosetta Tharpe were for it.
Now, you mentioned that she doesn't often get credit because of her gender, and you also said that she's kept out of many of like history books, and there's educational texts that don't even mention her.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's. Yeah, and she needs to get more attention than she's gotten.
Because I've read and have heard of her being described as the mother of modern music, and you know, that's a heavy moniker, and a lot of people even call her the godmother of rock and roll because, as you said, she influenced Elvis and Chuck Berry. As far as Sister Rosetta Tharpe, why do you feel like she may be the most underappreciated person in music history or American music history?
That's so hard to answer. I don't really. I mean, I think it's just always been that way. Like the people who get the most credit aren't always the best musicians or the most influential musicians, and you know, so much of it has to do with looks and with. You know, like people pay attention to that more so than they do to the musicianship, and you know, it's a little bit of the same problem with Elvis getting so much more commercial credit than, say, Little Richard or Chuck Berry. Even though, in my opinion, Little Richard and Chuck Berry and Sister Rosetta Tharpe really kind of did more to set the model for rock and roll and guitar playing and so forth. But. Yeah, kind of. I'm sorry. I wish I could say more about it, but it is unfair. It is really unfair, and of course, it's just such a part of the history of this music that you know, white artists often come in and do it and make a lot of money off of things that Black people have already been doing for a long time and not getting that commercial credit for it.
Certainly. Nah, I understand well. Yeah, because even like her, like I said, when I was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, she was mentioned as an early innovator. So I love to see that she was starting to get more credit and more appreciation.
I'm glad they mentioned her. Yeah.
Certainly, because I'm like, man, like the mother.
A lot of textbooks don't mention her.
Don't mention her. And a mother of modern music is a heavy name to carry. I was like, wow. And especially just her life and growing up in Arkansas, how she made it from, she was influential in jazz, she was influential in rock, she, like you said before, guitar playing. So, yeah, I just never ever understood why she just never got the credit that she really ever deserved. I mean, as far as her being an influence. But as far as rock and roll, Elvis is often credited as the king of rock and roll. And you say, or excuse me, I believe that we, correct me if I'm wrong, off air, you said that really Chuck Berry should have that moniker. Can you talk a little bit about him and what he did and why you feel so strongly?
Yeah, I mean, Elvis is great. Everybody loves Elvis. However, Elvis did not write any of his own music, and he also wasn't really a player. He was kind of just a singer, and I don't want to knock that because I'm kind of just a singer too. Like, singers are wonderful. Where would we be without singers? But I feel like to have the moniker of King of Rock and Roll, you need to have done some writing, and he really didn't. And but Chuck Berry wrote lots of lyrics and really smart lyrics. Chuck Berry wrote these very verbally dense songs where he packs a lot of material into 3 minutes. And also Chuck Berry was such a great guitar player, and he really made guitar a signature instrument for rock. You know, when we think of rock, we think of the electric guitar, and we think of bands writing their own music as opposed to having music written for them by outsiders. So for me, you know, Chuck Berry really set that model. And and then Jimi Hendrix came along and revolutionized the electric guitar further. So I would say, yeah.
Chuck would deserve that. He's more deserving of that. He's earned that moniker.
I would say so. And I'll also just add that he and Little Richard also really established rock rhythm, okay? Because when Elvis was doing it, it was still kind of a shuffle rhythm, but when people think of rock and roll, what they really think of is that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And it took a while for that sound to coalesce, but you listen to Little Richard's recordings in the mid-50s of him playing piano, and you hear that rock rhythm like really, really there. Okay, whereas you don't necessarily hear that in some of Elvis's music. So, yeah, I would say between Little Richard and Chuck Berry, establishing rock rhythm, establishing the electric guitar as the really central instrument, and writing their own songs, like that's really what created rock ultimately.
Okay, so you said establishing rock rhythm and creating their own songs, and Chuck Berry is, because Elvis didn't write, Chuck Berry would then pretty much be the person who, and he came before Elvis.
I mean, they were pretty much at the same time, but yeah, I think he was active a bit earlier, and then Elvis kind of swooped in, but Chuck Berry was Elvis's career only lasted about 3 years in the limelight, and then he got drafted, and that was, I mean, he continued to do things, but I mean, I guess that first wave of rockers, like, they all had pretty short careers because that early wave of rock and roll kind of fell apart because a number of those folks died in plane crashes. Like Buddy Holly died in a plane crash. I think Gene Vincent did too. And then Elvis got drafted in the Army, and there was a payola scandal with bribery of DJs and stuff. So rock kind of died for a little bit, but then it came back in the 60s and became really big.
Certainly. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, just to wrap it up, Dr. Forshaw, you make music, and can you talk to us a little bit about your music?
Sure. So first of all, I really do consider myself primarily a teacher, and you know, most of what I do is, you know, there's music that I love, and I love sharing with students, and I'm also grateful that I get to write a little music myself and make a little music. So I was in a duo called Avalon for several years, and now we're a trio. We have a third person, and so we have a band called The Fire Within, and we just released an album yesterday, and
Congrats.
so we're excited about that, and
Certainly.
planning a CD release concert and all that. So
Certainly. Make sure y'all go get that album, Avalon, The Duo Within. Certainly. Where's it located? Or where can they...
if you look on Spotify, if you look for The Fire Within on Spotify, that'll come up.
Make sure y'all jump on all the DSPs. Bandcamp?
We're on Bandcamp
Jump
as
on
well.
Bandcamp.
Yeah.
Make sure that y'all go buy that for sure. Dr. Forshaw, last question I have for you, because what is it? Avalon's, your first album was called My Evil Plan.
So actually, we had an album called Avalon, and then our second album was called My Evil Plan.
My apologies. Thank you for correcting me.
That's fine.
So your second album is called My Evil Plan. Now I don't take that, you know what I'm saying, as a inherently evil thing. But one thing I've noticed about a lot of modern music is there is a lot of Satan imagery, and I was having conversations with people, and they were like, well, Cato, this imagery comes from rock and roll. They would use, I've been told that rock artists would use it to, gain attention, to, make themselves more edgy. It was more of an image thing. And, now I've seen it in hip hop a lot. And I was like, well, where does the basis and where does the root of this come from? And would it be in rock? Where does the evil and all these snakes and the Satan and everything, and from Doja Cat's My Demons video to what Lil Nas X did with Montero a couple years ago, where is the basis of like I said, evil and just everything?
I think everybody loves a rebel, and Satan was kind of the original rebel. And he
was the archangel of music.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think there's a reason why certain myths come along, and there are so many stories about people selling their souls to the devil to become great musicians. So we mentioned earlier in the conversation Robert Johnson. There's this myth about him selling his soul at the crossroads and then writing his amazing blues, and it goes even back further. So there was a European violinist named Niccolo Paganini who also was reputed to have made a bargain with the devil for his amazing powers. So that's a story that goes back so far, and it's like the Christian concept of the devil meets voodoo concepts of demons for the blues, okay? Because the blues is steeped in demonic and occult imagery, right? You get Muddy Waters saying he's the Hoochie Coochie Man. He's got a black cat bone and a mojo. He's like invoking these demonic powers in a way. And you get Jimi Hendrix saying that he's the voodoo child. So it's like, it's so interesting because of course the devil is bad, but of course the devil, but the devil has always been a really appealing image to people who were in situations where they wanted to rebel, right? So of course that's been the situation of a lot of Black people for history, right? So it's like, on the one hand you have people in gospel being all about Jesus and wanting to avoid any dealings with the devil, but then you have the blues, which is kind of fascinated by the devil, right? And sometimes you have blues artists singing negatively about the devil, but sometimes you have blues artists kind of embracing that a little bit, and I just think that's really neat, and I think there's a reason why we like rebels. And
certainly. Gotcha. So, do you feel like overall in music, because as I said, you're not an evil person, but your second album is My Evil Plan. Is it just something? Should it morally be taken as something with a grain of salt?
Yeah.
As far as in a lot of music?
Yeah, honestly, musicians tend to be pretty nonviolent people in general. I'm not saying musicians are any nicer than average. I don't know that musicians are better people than average necessarily, but yeah, I think musicians like to embrace that rebel image, and heavy metal is basically an entire genre that's kind of devoted to the dark side, but most metal musicians are perfectly not. They're not bad people, I think, all musicians are inherently a little bit rebellious. Like we all got that little rebellious force inside us.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, some of my favorite, one of my favorite rap groups is 3 6 Mafia. It's in the name.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would just see, but I feel like today with Satan, it's taken to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I think also part of it is, there's always this desire to be the most outrageous person, and it seems like, people are competing for the limelight in the pop music world, and the way you get limelight is you say or do outrageous things 24/7.
Yeah.
So I think, like some of that has led, like that's been a bad direction for some people. It doesn't have to be a competition to see who can be the most outrageous. Like that can get bad quickly.
Yeah, because I think my thing with it is like, even as you said before, when we talk about Jimi Hendrix, or even when we talk about 3 6 Mafia and a lot of what happened within Memphis during that time, because underground Memphis hip hop is deep with a lot of Satan themes within the lyrics and even sometimes in the imagery. I feel like today it's just distasteful now. Like it's just gone beyond what originally it was probably used for.
Yeah. Well, I think we're in a very extreme time right now in general, where people, like, we're at kind of a maximum level of polarization in our society and just kind of fear about all sorts of global issues. And I think that is reflected in the pop music scene to some extent, where things are just getting kind of so outrageous and out of control.
Certainly.
Music reflects other things that are happening in society.
Reality.
And that's the wonderful and scary thing about music.
Yeah, I've always said music reflects reality.
Yeah.
Generally, if this is something that somebody made, and a lot of music comes from, a lot of people's real lives, and even sometimes it can come from fabrics of imagination. I mean, if it's being put in music, generally it's happened in society. Certainly, I would agree. With Dr. Forshaw, as I said, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, and thank you, because I feel like we definitely recovered a majority of the episode. Dr. Forshaw, any last minute things that you want to say to the camera?
I think I just want to really thank you for doing this and having the initiative to do this. And I think podcasts are an exciting format, and I'm so glad that more young people are exploring it. And I think conversations are. I think we're having a really good conversation, and I think these types of conversations need to happen more often. And I just want to take my hat off. I'm not wearing a hat, but I gotta hand it to you. Like, this was really creative and interesting, and I think I wish you the best of luck with this podcast. And I love the name. I Got More to Say. Like, that is an amazing name. That is going to get people's attention.
Yes, ma'am. Certainly. I appreciate it, Dr. Forshaw. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
The show is really just to give people their flowers and to give people their recognition as far as for their contribution to music. And you do that each and every single day when you step in front of, young adults, young college students, and you give them so much knowledge, and you provoke thought. And you provoke creativity.
I try.
Yes, certainly, and you do a great job. And
you're doing it with your podcast, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Forshaw. So, really, this is me extending my platform to you is really just to give you your flowers and your credit as far as for what you do on a day-to-day basis. And thank you for being on the show, because there's other PhDs and professors that I reach out to that I don't hear nothing from. And, I don't take it personal. People have busy lives. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they missed it. Whatever it may be. Maybe they know they don't have the time. Perfectly fine. But the fact that you made the trip all the way up here during break in order to come up here, and as I said, we're educating the masses.
That's right.
Thousands of people are going to see this. Is something that I'm really appreciative for. But Dr. Forshaw, any last minute things for the camera? I know you got your album coming out.
Yeah.
Avalon.
I just have to say I didn't grow up listening to all that much black music other than Scott Joplin and some opera singers, and it's been such an adventure for me to learn more about all of this music, and I'm so happy I get to I get to enjoy this and share it with people.
Yes, well, gotcha. Well, make sure that y'all go run out and go grab, what's the name of Avalon's album?
Well, so my band is called The Fire Within now, and and the album is also called that. Yeah, we picked up a third member and changed our name.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
No, you didn't get it wrong.
Okay.
We just had a name change.
So The Fire Within by The Fire Within. Make sure y'all go stream that everywhere. Spotify, Apple Music. Go buy it on Bandcamp. You know what I'm saying? Definitely let's make sure that we support Dr. Forshaw. But Dr. Forshaw, once again, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be on the show. This is Dr. Juliet Forshaw. I'm Timothy Cato III, and as always, I got more to say.